Hey, this is part 2 of my 3-part series, what your dealer should have told you when you bought your GeoPro. I'm making this videos because a lot of people, when they buy a GeoPro, they don't understand how everything works, and maybe your dealer didn't do a great job going through everything. It certainly takes time. These video series is 2.5 hours long, so you're probably not going to get that kind of details from your dealership when you buy it. Plus, some people buy them used and they don't get that information at all. So the point of these videos is to give you confidence that you know how everything in your GeoPro works and what you should do when you go camping with it. So this is part 2. The first part was all the features outside the GeoPro. The second part is all the features inside the GeoPro. And there's a third part, and that's how to set up a campsite and break it back down when you're finished. So this is part 2, and we're going to start inside the camper as soon as you get in the doorway. So normally when you first come into your camper, it's going to be dark. No lights will be on. To turn the lights on, the first switch on your instrument panel here says lights, and this is the interior light. Clicking that switch will turn all the interior lights on if they're on by themselves. The camper has 2 ways of turning lights on. There's the master switch here on the control panel, and each individual puck light has a button in the center that you can click it and it'll turn on and off. So if you go through your camper and turn off all the lights with a click, and then you come back to your camper in the dark and you say, okay, I need to turn the lights on, you hit that switch, nothing's going to come on. So the trick we use is we leave a couple interior lights on when we're going away and we think we're going to come back late. We turn the switch off at the door. Now there's no lights on the camper when we leave. We come back and hit that switch right by the door when we first come in. At least some lights will come on so you can see inside the camper. Some people just leave their lights on in the camper all the time when they go away. But it depends. If you're boondocking, you don't want to use that power, you probably want to turn it off on the switch there. There's one light in the camper that the interior switch doesn't control. That's the light in the bathroom. This light is controlled by a switch by the door, plus once again the light switch here. So even if I go out here and turn off even if I come out here and turn off all the lights in the interior with this switch, you'll notice the bathroom light stays on, because that one has a switch on the wall that's separate from this. So basically there's 2 lighting circuits in here. One in the bathroom, and the rest are out here in the main area, controlled by this switch. This is the main control panel for your GeoPro. There's 3 light switches. One is your interior lights, which I went over. Another one is your porch light. Now the interesting thing about your porch light is the porch light is a kind of an amber light. It's not a white like the rest of the lights. And theoretically it doesn't attract bugs. So if you want to keep a light on at night in an area that's got a lot of flying insects, so you can see outside if anybody comes, or just see the area by your steps and when you want to go out, then you can leave that porch light on and it won't attract insects as much. The awning light is the strip light that's along the edge of your awning, which I'll show you the extension of the awning later, that gives you a white light across the whole area under your awning. That one will attract bugs, so if you're going outside and you don't want a lot of bugs, I'll just leave the porch light on. Above that is your gauge for your tanks and battery. There's 4 little buttons here. They'll test the level of each of those components. So the first one you push it is your battery. As you can see, my battery's full. If I hold the freshwater tank down, you see it's empty right now. I don't have any water in my fresh tank. But if I did, it would show up to 1/3, 2/3, and full. Next button is a black tank, which also shows I'm empty right now. And the last one is your gray tank. It's important to watch the levels of your black and gray tank and your freshwater tank. Your freshwater tank is probably important if you're boondocking and you're just using your own water supply. You want to know how much water you have left before it runs out. But the black and gray you really want to keep your eye on, because if they overflow, they'll come back up your plumbing. Black, really bad if it comes back up your toilet. Gray is bad because it'll come up probably your tub drain first. So you want to keep watching that and know when you have to dump. On the top there's 3 buttons here. Some campers have a 4th button here for your tag heater. That's basically a heating pad that goes under your water tanks. It keeps them from freezing if you're in cold weather. We don't have that because we don't go to cold weather. But you have your water pump. That turns on the water pump in here. If you're on city water at a campground, you have your water hooked up, you don't need that switch. In fact, you don't want to turn it on. That's just an extra thing to pressurize the water, but your water coming in from your hookups are already pressurized, so you can leave that one off. If you're boondocking and you're going to be using the water out of your tank, then you turn your water pump on to run the water. When you turn that on, you should hear the pump come on, and it knows that it's pulling some water up, and it'll stop when the water system gets pressurized. And every time you turn on the water somewhere, if you're boondocking, the pump will run to provide pressure. The next 2 are both water heater switches. We have 2 different types of heaters on this water heater, 2 different types of power sources on this water heater. We have gas, which uses propane, even though it's called gas, I really should say propane, and electric. Electric is not 12 volt. You cannot heat your water heater with 12 volt I wouldn't even try to use it on the inverter. This is for if you're hooked to a 120 volt connection at your campground. You can electrically heat your water. You don't have to use propane. That's the preferred if you're at a campground. The other one is gas. If you're boondocking, you want hot water. If you want to use your propane, you put that on to heat the water with propane. A little trick is if you come back on a cold day and you want to take a shower or wash dishes or get some hot water quickly and it's cold and you're hooked up at the campground, you theoretically could turn both of them on at the same time. That way it's going to run both electric and propane heat to heat the water. It's going to heat it that much faster, but I wouldn't do that regularly, but you can do that. The last switch here is to extend and retract your awning. I'm going to go through the awning operations later, but that's the switch for it. Another important accessory right by the door is your fire extinguisher. Normally on the 19FDs, this fire extinguisher is on that side, but when I removed the dinette system in this camper, we moved it to this side. But either way, it should be right inside the door. The reason why is because if there's a fire in your camper, you're either going to be exiting and grabbing the fire extinguisher, or it'll be you're not being in the camper, you want to grab the fire extinguisher as soon as you get in there so you can put the fire out. So it's important to have your fire extinguisher. It should have came with your camper, but you want to know where it is and be able to grab it and use it if you need to. You should regularly check it too to make sure it's still working. The blinds in the GeoPro are behind the valance. They're a roll down blind. You pull it down to the level you want and let go, it should stay there. And then to get it back up, just give it a slight tug and it should release the mechanism and it goes back up. To open the actual window, you have these little handles here. You rotate that clockwise and the window cranks out. The nice thing is that it'll let the air in, but because it's still covered, if it rains, the rain really doesn't come in. I guess if it's really heavy rain blowing in, it might, but on most conditions, that'll keep the rain from coming in when the window's cranked. One thing is, when your window gets to the crank gets to the end, I like to keep the crank in a horizontal position. That way, when I bring down the blind, I can let it sit right at the level of the handle, and it'll cover the whole window, but not hit the handle vertically, because that will keep it from opening all the way. When you're driving down the road with your camper, and you're ready to move, what we usually do is keep the blinds up. The reason you do that is not because you want people looking in your camper or anything, although that might be also useful if there's like an accident and they want to see if anybody's in the camper, but it's just so that when you have the blind down and you're driving down the road, this is going to go like this the whole time. Eventually you'll probably break the blind or put marks on it or whatever, so by keeping it up when you travel, it doesn't rattle and it's not going to damage the blinds. The cabinets in the GeoPro, especially the upper ones, but really all the cabinets, they don't have any kind of locking mechanism. They have like a latch that holds it a little bit tight so you can keep it closed. But when you're driving down the road, if you hit bumps or speed bumps or any kind of potholes, there's a good chance those doors will fly open. And then anything you have in there is going to fall out. So you want to be careful what you put in your upper cabinets. You don't want to put any kind of glassware or things like that in the upper cabinets because it could fall out. Alternatively, you could put a lock on the cabinet yourself. I've seen people put actual key locks in there, but what we do is my wife puts bungee cords on the handles to hold them closed as we're driving down the road, because we had an accident when we first bought the GeoPro. We went over a speed bump and all the dinner plates in there fell out and smashed all over the floor. So just be aware that all the doors will come open as you're driving down the road if you don't keep them latched in some way. So especially don't put breakable things up there. Let's talk about the inverter. The inverter is a way of taking battery voltage and convert it to 115 if you need to use a 115 appliances inside. Now, I will tell you this, that nothing will use power from your battery quicker than the inverter. But if you need it, you push this button here, the green light will come on. Now, your 115 outlets are now working inside the camper because it's converting the battery power into 115 volts. So sometimes we'll put that on if we want to make toast. We want to use the toaster, or we have something particular we need to plug in. The microwave still will not work on the inverter. You can see here the light's still not on. And the AC will not work. But all the other 115 outlets in the camper will work. The ones here, and the ones under the dinette if you have a dinette, and the one on the outside of the camper, and the one on the side of the bed. So those now will have 115 volts out of it. But I will tell you that even though I don't have anything plugged into the 115 right now, it's still drawing a fair amount of electricity from the battery just by having the inverter on, because the inverter actually has a lot of losses. Now you can see here it was 100%, and it only turned the inverter on maybe a few minutes ago. It still shows 115, but you can see that it went from 13.2 volts to 13.1. And if we leave it on for a while, well, there you go, it just dropped to 90% already. So it uses a lot of power. So I don't recommend using the inverter unless you absolutely have to, but if you need to, the inverter is available. One of the problems I know people have is that they turn the inverter on at night and they kind of forget about it, and then they can't understand why the battery keeps draining. See, now we're at 90%, and I'm not sure how long it'll last. I haven't done a test, but it draws down pretty quick now. I know some people have CPAP machines, and so they have to run a 110 volt at night, and I know people do that, and it works for them, but the batteries are dead by morning, and they have to recharge them. If you're boondocking with a CPAP machine, I mean, obviously, if you're on shore power, if you're in a campsite, you don't need the inverter. I mean, it's already got 110 volts. But if you're boondocking and you need to use a CPAP machine, I think you should probably look into a 12 volt CPAP machine, because those you can run off the battery without an inverter and they'll last all night, no problem. So when you're done with the inverter, you just push the button again, the light will go off, and now the inverter's off. Remember to do that, or you're going to find yourself with a dead battery very quickly. Next to the bed is 2 USB outlets. Those will work off of the batteries without having to have the inverter on. So if you do have a CPAP that will take a 12 volt and you have a USB connector for it, I know they make those, this is a good place to plug it in because it's right next to the bed. Alternatively, if you're on shore power and you have a regular CPAP, the 110 volts outlet on this side is a good place to put that. So I guess it depends on, if you're on shore power, what side of the bed you got to sleep on if you have a CPAP. Okay, this is the thermostat that controls the heater in your camper. The thermostat only controls heat, the heater. The air conditioning is separate, it's on the ceiling. They're not connected to each other, so unlike in your home where you have a thermostat that controls both heating and cooling, this is only for heating. So if you're camping in a cold weather area and you want to put your heat on, when the slider here is all the way to the left, it's off. When you move it across to the right, that'll turn it on. You should be able to hear the fan under the camper come on when you turn that on as it blows the hot air out. The gauge on the bottom shows the current temperature in the camper. It's a hot day today, so the temperature is really high. We don't obviously need a heater today. But if you're down here and the temperature is cold, when you put the heat on, you'll see the temperature slowly move up. You cannot set the temperature, the heater to cut off at a certain temperature. Unfortunately, some people replace these with more complicated one. If you're often in cold areas, you might be worthwhile doing it where you can actually set a temperature it stays at. With this, you just set hotter or warmer, and when it gets to a certain level of temperature, it's not really related to that, it'll turn off and turn on. So it will keep the heat at a specific level, but not a specific temperature. When you're finished, you just turn it off, and the heat will go off. You got to make sure you have your propane on for this to work. Obviously, it's a propane heater. It'll run off 12 volts, so you don't even need a battery. You don't have to be camping, so if you're boondocking, that's fine. But it needs to have your propane on. Under the sink, at the bottom is your heater. This is the thing that the thermostat controls. There's a panel in the front here that draws the heat in the camper in to run through and heat it. You want to make sure you don't have anything on top of that, so if you put something in your drawer and it falls on top, obviously it gets pretty hot and it'll melt. The actual heat from the heater comes out in vented ducts. First one's on the side of the cabinet, and there's another one under the tub. So this is where the hot air is blown out, and it's taken into this vent in front of the actual unit. So that's everything you need to know about your heater. Let's talk about the sink. When you bought your GeoPro, I am fairly much certain that it did not come with this sink. This is a Ravi sink, and it's an upgrade that I installed myself. And also the faucet that came with it is not your standard faucet. The 2020 that we got comes with a very small sink. I've upgraded to a larger sink now with a better faucet, but the one we have is very small. So this is an upgrade. If you want to see how we did that, there's video on my channel that goes to step-by-step directions how I upgraded that sink. Next to the sink is a little fold-out table that gives you extra workspace. I know when we're cooking breakfast, I put the toaster on there. You might put your coffee pot on there because there's an outlet right there. Or whatever you want to do, store things when you're breaking. It's a nice little table that comes up. Unfortunately, it's not level with the countertop. There is somebody I know in the GeoPro Facebook group that makes cabinet tops that match up level to that. If you wanted to upgrade, I haven't done that. But to bring that cabinet up, you just lift it up, and it should lock into place. And to put it back down, lift up slightly, and then each of the arms will push in once it's lifted and unlocked. That way the table will go back down. Okay, let's talk about the stove. The stove is a 3-burner propane stove. It has a glass cover on it, so if you need an extra work area there, you just keep the cover down. But to use it, you want to remove that glass cover by folding it up twice, and then sit against the back window. There's a hood here which vents outside, so there's a flap outside you want to open up so the air will flow, and then you turn the fan on, and the air will run out. That funny sound you just heard is the flap outside is not open, so therefore the air has nowhere to go. I'll show you when we go outside what how to open that flap outside. To ignite the stove, unfortunately this stove does not have self-igniters, so to use it you're going to need a lighter. So you just take your stove and move it all the way to light. That's maximum flow. Put a burner in front of it and then it comes on, and then you can adjust it to the right temperature. Other than that, it works like a normal stove. When you're finished, turn it off and the propane's off. Now one warning is you want to let the stove cool down completely, so it's completely cool, before you put this glass cover back on, because otherwise the heat could rise up, heat up the cover enough that when it touches something cool, like some water gets splashed down from the sink or something like that, it could shatter. So make sure the stove's completely cool before you put the cover back on. You notice the blind you have behind the stove is a metal blind, unlike the other blinds. The reason why is for safety concerns. If the flames get hot on here, the heat gets up, these ones won't catch fire or melt like the vinyl liner ones would. So the light works on here, works off battery, and the fan works off battery, so if you're boondocking, you can use both. One of the things that we do is that this glass cover, as you drive down the road, will rattle and smack, and it could shatter. And I've heard of people who have GeoPros that as they went over rough surfaces of driving down the road, their glass cooktop thing shattered. So to prevent that, my wife got a foam mat. And when you lift the stove up, once again, make sure the stove is completely cool. We put this foam mat on top, and then put the glass down with it underneath it. And now, if this goes on a bumpy road, the glass won't shatter. It's just going to hit on a foam cushion. Okay, let's talk about the microwave. If you've used the microwave at home, very similar. This is a Magic Chef. I'm not sure if all GeoPros come with a Magic Chef, but this one does. You've got a button here opens the door. There's various items on the control pad that allows you to cook certain things. It was already set up for it. Regularly, you got a timer to cook. The buttons to set the amount of time you want it to cook, and stop and start. Works just like a home microwave. I'm not going to do a lot of details with it. It's got a plate, so it rotates just like most microwaves do to get even cooking. Now, the caveat of this microwave, I guess I'll talk about two things. One, it only works if you're on shore power. You cannot run this microwave on battery power. Now, theoretically, somebody said you can put the inverter on and then you have to wire it to do it off the inverter, but I have no idea why you were boondocking and you want to use the microwave. Use a stove, use something else. Don't use the microwave when you're boondocking. If you hook to shore power, no problem, use your microwave. Second thing I want to talk about is that this plate right here is glass. When you're driving down the road, you could bump and break. We're worried about that, so what my wife and I do is, before we leave campsite, she wraps the plate in a dish towel. And then puts it in the microwave like that. Gives it a little bit of padding. She probably does a better job of wrapping than I do. Gives it a little bit of padding as you're driving down the road. That plate's probably not going to break now. When your microwave's on and you're sleeping, this light is very bright. It'll light up the display here for time. Will light up the whole camper. It can kind of irritating at night, so we just take a fridge magnet, stick it over top, and blocks that light at night. This is the Dometic refrigerator that came with the GeoPro model we have. I know they've changed it after that to have some 120 volts, but this one runs on two sources of power. It runs on 120 and it runs on gas. It does not run on 12 volts. You have to have one of those two things. So if you're at a campground, you're plugged into shore power, then you're going to run it off 120. If you're boondocking, you're going to run it off propane. You can also run it off propane as you drive down the road. We don't do that, but people do, and it keeps it cool just using a little bit of propane. So it has two buttons on it essentially. There's an on-off button, obviously that turns the refrigerator on or off, and there's a gas button. When the gas button is pressed in, it's on auto, which means it automatically detects whether it has 120 volts, and if it doesn't, then it tries to start the gas to ignite it. If you want it to go on gas, even if you're on 120, if you take that button off, it'll run the refrigerator on propane even though you're connected to 120. So we usually leave it on auto. So when you get to a campground and plug in, the button gets pushed in, it turns on, you see the lights come on, and now the check light's running. What that means is it's checking to see if the gas is available so it can light up. You listen carefully. You hear the igniter starting. It's trying to light up the gas. Now if that doesn't light up, if you hear it clicking over and over again, that means it's not getting gas. So what you want to do then is make sure that your propane is turned on and that there's not air in the lines. When you store your camper for a while, or even sometimes when you drive for a while, the propane will like evaporate, and then there won't be enough propane getting to the fridge because it uses a very small amount of propane to run. So what I do is then you turn it off, and you can go to your stove, light a burner. Now that the burner's on, I know the propane now, all the propane in the line is cleared up, and all the air in the line is removed, and there's propane all the way to the stove, so I just turn it back off. Now there should be enough propane coming to the fridge to turn on. So I'm going to try it again. It's checking, trying to ignite the propane. And now you hear the igniter's gone off because it's burning now, and it's actually cooling the fridge with propane. Okay, this handle here has a latch on it. So when you're driving down the road, unlike the cupboards and that, it will not come open as you go over bumps and that. But that means to open it, you got to push that little button in to open it. When you close it, you just push, it should latch. The refrigerator itself has an upper freezer and then a larger refrigerator area. We put a thermostat on here just so we can see what the temperature is like, so we know whether there's a problem. One thing about these refrigerators is the type of refrigerator this is, it doesn't have a compressor, so it takes a long time to cool. A lot of people think there's something wrong with the refrigerator because it takes too long to cool. Well, that's just the way these type of refrigerators are. They don't cool real fast, which means when you're camping, you only want to open the refrigerator for short periods of time to get what you want and close it again. Don't do like you do sometimes people do at home, especially kids, and they stand there and open the door and have a look in the refrigerator to see what's there and let all the cold air out. Otherwise your stuff will never be very cold. One of the things we do is my wife will freeze water bottles before we go on our trip and put them in there in the morning we're leaving. That way the refrigerator gets colder much faster. It acts like a big cooler. Then when we get to the campsite and we plug onto 110 or 120, the refrigerator doesn't take long to cool down because it's already kind of cold. So that's a little trip when you're on short. You can also, as you drive to your location, leave the refrigerator running on propane, but we don't do that. One of the things you got to be aware of with these type of refrigerators is that because they don't use a compressor, they need to be leveled to work. So you need to lever your camper at the campground before you put your fridge on. Because if you leave it on when the camper's not level, therefore the fridge is not level, it won't work. Plus you can actually damage it over a period of time. So it's very important to get your refrigerator level for it to work and to not damage it. On the back of the refrigerator, the fins that are actually the cooling fins, and there's a little slider on here. What that does is you can actually adjust the temperature of the refrigerator based on where that is. So if you move it up, it gets colder. If you move it down on that fin, the fridge will be warmer. So depending on how your refrigerator is going, you can move that up and down, and it'll keep the refrigerator colder or warmer. On the ceiling in the corner in front of the TV is your smoke detector. Works just like a household smoke detector. You should probably about monthly test it by just holding on the button here. And it goes off just like a house smoke detector. If it chirps a little bit, it means the battery's getting low. Just like a home smoke detector, you have to take it off and change the battery. Sometimes if you're cooking in your camper and the smoke gets in here, it'll go off. So you can take it down by just twisting it slightly, and it comes off these two screws in the ceiling. But when you're finished and the smoke clears, you want to put it back up on the ceiling because smoke rises when there's a fire, and so it's going to detect the smoke most effectively if it's on the ceiling. So it needs to go back up on the ceiling. The next device you need to be aware of is the carbon monoxide and propane leak detector. Carbon monoxide would be as if you have your heater running, or even if your car is running, your vehicle's running and the fumes get into the vehicle. Carbon monoxide is odorless and colorless, and it can cause you to fall asleep and die. So it's very dangerous. And of course propane is just if you have a leak in your propane line, which is also dangerous. So we have one detector that will detect both of them. It's under the bottom of the fridge and has a button on. You should test it monthly. Okay, to test it, you push the little button, and both the red and green should flash, and you'll hear the chirp, which is the first alarm, 4 chirps. So when you push the button to test it, it'll beep 4 times, and then it'll do a longer beep. There's a period of time between the two, and you think it's done, and then you hear it again. If you have a carbon monoxide leak, it'll be flashing red, and it'll have the chirps. kind of like a little bit like the chirps you get when your smoke detector batteries are low, but there'll be 4 in a row instead of just 1. And it'll go continuously too. 4 in a row, wait, 4 in a row. Whereas the smoke detector, if its battery's low, only chirps like once every minute or 2. If it detects a propane leak, the red light will stay flashing on, steady on, not flashing, and you will hear a long continuous beep. Either way, if you hear either of those 2 alarms, you need to get out of the camper, open all the windows, turn off the propane, turn off the heater, and then go in and see what the source is when the alarm goes off. You don't want to sit there and see it flashing and say, I wonder if it's carbon monoxide or propane. Just get out and open the windows first. If the smoke detector or the propane and carbon monoxide detector have a low battery, they'll chirp like intermittently. It says once a minute, but really it's every intermittently, just like most house smoke detectors in their house. Right, underneath your refrigerator is your combination fuse panel and breaker panel and charger. The screen here has a fan behind it, so sometimes dust will collect on here, and you might hear a whirring sound of it when you're plugged into shore power, because the fan in here is used to cool down the converter. So you can just once in a while wipe your hand across there and wipe off any dust that collects. To open it, you just push in the center at the top and release and fall down. On the left-hand side are circuit breakers for your AC circuits. If you're not connected to shore power, these shouldn't be doing anything unless your inverter happens to be on. But they work just like household circuit breakers. There's some 30 amps and some 20 and 15s. They flip down if they break, or to turn them off, and then you just flip them back up if they happen to be broken or if you turned them off. On the right hand side are your DC fuses. These are blade fuses for the DC circuits in here. So if you're on battery power or anytime they're using and you have circuits that are on DC, they will come through these circuits. I have a wiring diagram here, not a wiring diagram, but a fuse panel list that'll say what all these circuits, all these breakers are for. The last one's 40, then they're 30, then a bunch of 15s. But I'll put that in the corner here to show you what the breakers are for. These are kind of tricky to see if they're tripped because unlike the circuit breakers, which you can see that it's down, you can't tell they're burned out unless you pull them out and then look at them. This is the fan that goes to the converter. And as you see, mine's a little bit dusty because it hasn't been cleaned in a while. So once in a while you need to clean that off to get the dust off of it because it'll pull dust from the camper and collect. What this does is, and it's behind the fuse panel, is it takes your shore power, your Win15, and converts it down to 12 volts to charge your battery. So whenever you're on shore power, this will charge your battery. Now, this converter is designed for lead acid batteries. So it charges your lead acid battery to 100%. But if you've changed your battery over to a lithium ion phosphate battery, this doesn't provide enough voltage to get it to 100%. So when you're on shore power, your batteries will never actually get to 100%. However, if you're using the GoPro solar charger, that does provide the voltage if you change the battery type to charge your batteries to 100%. So if you're never going to be on shore, never going to use solar, if your solar's not working, you're probably going to have to change your converter if you want your batteries to get to 100%. If you're using lithium iron phosphate. But if you've got solar, then you don't have to worry because this will charge you to 80%, and then your solars will top it off to 100% when the sun comes up. So just be aware of that as a limitation if you change this converter if you change to lithium iron phosphate batteries. Whenever I camp, I carry a packet of spare fuses. I think it's worthwhile because you don't want a fuse to go out when you're camping somewhere and you need a fuse and there's none available. So I have a variety of fuses here that I can put in. If something breaks, I can easily replace the fuse and not have to say, oh, I can't use the circuit until I somehow find an electronic or an auto store. You can get DC fuses in auto parts stores. I have to find an auto parts store before I can use whatever circuit it is and disconnect from the campsite or drive to the auto parts store and find it. It's easier to me to just carry them, a selection of them. They're not expensive, and then I can replace it if anything goes bad. Okay, the next item in the camper I want to talk about is our GoPower solar controller. This is a controller that takes the power from the solar panel on your roof, or the side panel if you have that, and uses it to charge the batteries. It also controls the flow out of the batteries. Okay, the first thing I want to notice is there's a USB port here. This allows you to charge USB or use USB devices directly from this panel here, which wires it directly from the battery. So it's just an extra USB port. If the battery's voltage falls too low, it'll turn off that port. So you have to have the batteries close to, at least like over 10 or 20% for that to work. But most of the time, when you're camping, that'll be fine. Right now, my batteries are at 100%. That's what that screen shows. We put this platform here to put a clock on. And it's a large clock that has big display on it, so we can see it from the bed and see what time it is, but it's not overpowering because unfortunately in the GeoPro there's no real clock to show the time except for the one over the microwave, which when you're in the Murphy bed is not visible. Anyways, put the clock on here when we camp. There's a Velcro thing here to keep the clock on so it doesn't fall off when the camper shakes for whatever reason. But anyways, it has a USB power source, so we plug it right into the charge controller here, so that works really well. So going back to the charge controller, the solar controller, we have a display on here, and when you leave it in default mode, it cycles through all the different options that the screen has. If you touch any of the buttons, it'll light up at night so you can easily see it. So what I see right now is it's nighttime, so there's no current coming in, so it shows 0 amps coming from the sun, or in this case the moon, to the batteries. So it's daytime now, and you can see that with the sunlight we're getting right now, about 1.4 amps coming into the battery, and the batteries are at 100%. And then we switch to the battery voltage, which currently our batteries are 13.2 voltage, which should be right for the batteries we have. Back to the no current going into the battery. And its battery currently at 100% capacity. Those are the things you really want to know, the percentage of power coming into the battery and what the current state of the battery charge is. One of the neat things that this charge controller has is this max boost button. So if you're camping and you have full solar power coming into your solar panels and your battery's getting low and you want to get it charged fast, you can push that max boost button by holding it for 3 seconds, and it'll increase the voltage coming to your battery, which allows it to charge faster for, I think, about a half an hour. Now, it shouldn't do that too often. If you have lead acid batteries, if you do it too often, you can damage it. And if you do it with the lithium-ion batteries, it'll shorten their lifespan. So you shouldn't do it more than once or twice a day at the most. Not all the time, but when you do it, the batteries will charge faster. Now, chances are when you bought your RV, the GeoPro came with lead acid batteries. That's the standard type of car batteries. They might also have marine flooded batteries, which are a little bit better. If you want to change the type of battery you had to, say, lithium iron, which I've done, if you push this B controller and hold it down, it'll let you select between flooded batteries or lithium ion batteries. You want to change those to the type of battery you have so that the charge controller's profile matches your batteries and it charges it correctly. So don't put a lithium battery in there and leave it on your lead acid batteries or flooded battery charge type. This little button here turns your inverter on and off if it's wired to this. My GeoPro wasn't wired, so you got to actually go to the button we have on the other side of the camper to turn your inverter on. But yours might have been wired up, so that one does turn it off. Okay, let's talk about the TV that's in the GeoPro. The TV is a Naxa 12 volt TV, which means it runs off 12 volts. That means that the TV will work perfectly when you're just on battery power. So you should have got a remote that came with the TV. To turn it on, you just push the power button on the remote. It'll boot up. So you first turn it on, you probably won't get any signal because you haven't set it up yet, unless it just so happened the last person set it up who used the camper and it was correct. But chances are you're probably going to have to go to the remote and push the button that says menu on the top right. So if you bring it up and it says picture, is the icon that's lit up in the top corner. So hit the right button on the circle of the remote until channel comes up, and then you want to select between cable, air. So right now I'm going to show you the over-air reception, so we're going to pick air, and then we're going to bring it down and select auto scan. It'll come up and say start to scan. This is enter. Push enter again, and now it's going to go through and find all the channels it can find in the area. Now, when you first scan here, it may not find any channels. The reason for that is, depending on where you are and how many broadcast channels are and how close the stations are, you may be at the edge of the range of the broadcast channels in your area, and they might be directional to you. Obviously, when you're camping and you're boondocking, you could be a long way from TV stations. So you may have to go to directional antenna, which is located in the center of the roof here, and rotate the antenna by pushing it up and turning it. Now, the default is this knob's the front, and the antenna, directional antenna, is facing forward. If you don't get any channels, you take it, push it up, and turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then scan the channels again. If you still don't get any, do 90 more degrees, and continue going until you get a few channels. If you don't get any channels, well, I'm sorry, there's no broadcast TV in your area. If you then go through and you do have enough channels, but when you watch the TV, they're a bit staticky, well, you don't want to change the direction completely of the antenna, so just move it a few degrees left or right of where it is, and you may get a better picture. Now you don't have to rescan, you just watch the channel and see if it gets clearer when you move it to the left or right. The antenna's on the top of the camper, so really that's about as best signal you're going to get at your camping location. So if you're in the middle of a city, like I am right now, you're going to get lots of channels, not a problem. But if you're out in the country and it's the city is a certain direction from you, you probably want to put the front end of the antenna towards that city and then move it slightly, and that's the best signal you're going to get. We've camped places where we only get like 1 channel or 2 channels. That's all you get. You're camping, you're not sitting at home watching TV. It takes a while for the scanning to complete. Sometimes this thing might take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes for it to scan all the channels, depending on where it is. But when it's done, it'll start playing the first channel it found. Okay, it's finished scanning, so now it brings up the channel. As you can see, because I'm in the city, Tampa, we have lots of channels. They all come in pretty clear, so I don't have to worry about turning the antennas. But if I just push the channel up and down button, we can scroll through the channels. Now, if you find it difficult to see from this side of the camper, you want to move it. The arm comes out and the TV can move left and right. I'm going to swing this TV out and show you some other options. You can, all the things I did with the remote, you can also do with the buttons on the side if you happen to lose them both. So you got a power button right here to turn the TV on and off. That's the play and eject button for the DVD player. That's the menu and select button for the menu. That's volume up and down. Channel up and down and volume up and down. So if you don't have the remote, you could use the side buttons too. Also built into this TV is a DVD player. So to use that, you just take your DVD out of its case, slide it disc side up through here. Then you use the remote to play the DVD just like you would a normal DVD player. So now that we see we've got broadcast channels, let me show you how to use cable. Okay, this connector here on the back of the cable, back of the TV, is actually the power for the TV. It's weird, it's actually a 12 volt outlet like you might have in the car, because this TV is designed to plug into a 12 volt car plug. So they have a 12 volt car plug there. That's actually the power for the TV. Next to it is a little button that runs power to the antenna on the roof, because it's a power directional antenna. So if you're going to watch broadcast TV on here, you want to have that light on to boost the signal of the antenna. If you don't have that light on, if you're in the middle of the city like I am, you probably still would get cable. Still would get broadcast signal, but you won't get it in the fringes. Whereas if that's on, you're going to get the maximum range that the roof antenna can get. If you connect to cable TV in the park, then you want to turn that power off. That'll reduce the amount of interference from the cable line going to the TV. So, power on, power switch on, broadcast TV, power switch off, cable TV. There is an extra outlet here that you can put a cable on. That is for satellite. If you have your own satellite dish, that's the other outlet that's on the back of the camper. It's basically wired from here to that outlet. You notice there's also a power outlet here. If you have a different type of TV that plugs into AC, you can put it in there. But this is the one for the DC TV that comes with the camper. As the cables go back, this is a HDMI cable, and that hooks to this HDMI port here. And if you want to put like your laptop to the TV, or your maybe you have a Fire TV you want to run, you can actually plug it in there and it'll direct it to the cable up here. However, mine got broke, so I don't use it anymore because I never plug anything in there, and I'll show you how to get around that. Then I just come to the back of the TV and plug my Fire Stick into the HDMI port that's right there, which is what I do instead of using the Furrion connection. So that's everything for your remote and TV. Once you have it set up, of course, you just use the channels and volume. Now, one thing I will tell you, the volume button here controls the volume on the TV, but even at the loudest volume, it's not particularly loud. Now, if it's on a quiet day and you're in a campground at night, it's probably fine. But if you have your AC running, bad news, you're not going to be able to hear the TV at all. So what I usually do is I run the TV through the Furrion sound system. That way the speakers over the bed can get the full volume of the TV. So let's go. That brings up to the next step is we're going to show the Furrion sound system. Okay, let's talk about the Furrion sound system. Furrion sound system is controlled by this power button at the bottom. You just hold that down for a few seconds. You'll see the scroll button comes on. Now we're on FM radio. If I want to change the channels of the FM radio, I just push this little left and right arrow buttons till I get to a station I like. So assuming that's the station I want to live, I can set the volume there. You can also change between AM and FM with this button here. There's 3 AM FM channels that you can make presets on, and 2 AM stations ranges you can put presets on. There's a USB button here, but you can't switch to USB unless you have a USB source in. So if I plug a USB source in that has MP3s on it, it'll automatically switch to USB and start playing the first song it finds. And you can use the buttons here to switch between songs. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the artist and title like some USB players do, but you can listen to the songs through the stereo system. You can also switch it to Bluetooth and link your phone to it. So what you do is you switch it to Bluetooth, and then you bring up your phone. If you go to pair your phone, you can see Furrion on there. Select that to pair. And once it's paired, I can listen to Bluetooth on there. I often listen to podcasts on here while I'm camping. Doesn't require any data if I've downloaded the podcast ahead of time, and I can listen to it. These 2 source zone buttons are important. Zone 1, if you hold it down, it turns it off. Zone 1 is the sound of the speakers inside your camper. Zone 2 is the speakers outside your camper. If you want to hear your podcast or your Bluetooth or whatever outside, you could turn on Zone 2 and listen to it outside. The same volume controls work. I'm going to hold down Zone 1 again, and now we have the internal speakers working again. Now, if I want to switch the Bluetooth, instead of Bluetooth, I want to be able to hear what's on my TV on my speakers. What I'm going to do is change my source. There's auxiliary, which is something that comes in on the HDMI port, or AV. And AV now, I'm hearing the sound on the TV coming through the speakers in my camper. Now, the weird thing about that is that you'll have volume both on the TV and on the stereo.
A snow giant. Wow. Well,
so that can be quite confusing because you need 2 different remotes to be able to control that. So what I usually do is turn the volume of the TV all the way down and control the volume with the Bluetooth remote.
Hey guys, nice snowsuit, Olive. Thanks. It's getting colder out. I need to bundle up to stay warm.
That way when I'm lying in bed and watching TV, I can adjust the volume from the bed, which is the volume I hear in the speakers overhead. If I use the TV and the air conditioning on, I can't hear the volume at all. So it's kind of a problem because you can't change the channel with this remote. You can only control the volume. So you're going to have both the remotes and switch between them. One for the volume that you can hear from the speakers, and one from the TV. It'd be nice if the designers had made it so that the TV volume through the Furrion volume can be controlled by the TV remote. Possibly you could get a universal remote to do that by default. This is the remote control for your Furrion, and the TV remote does the volume for the TV. I will tell you though, when you have the TV through the speakers over the bed, it's much clearer to hear. Now, one of the things I did is I changed the speakers out. These are not the default speakers that came with it. These are some aftermarket speakers I installed. They're not hard to install. The speakers that came with my GeoPro, I found the voice on them very tinny. It was hard to sometimes hear the dialogue without it being really high. When I put these new speakers in, my wife and I agree that when we're lying and watching a movie, we can definitely hear the dialogue much better. So it's an option to upgrade that. They're not too expensive. All you do is unscrew the old speakers and screw the new ones in if you get the right size speakers, but that's something I did. The Wi-Fi Ranger. It's on the panel next to the TV. It's got a switch here that you turn on by pushing up, and that'll power up the system. It takes like about 30 seconds or something to actually work. And then there's a sticker underneath that'll tell you what the network is that shows up on your laptop, what the password is, Initially it's changed me now 3514. I would suggest you change it when you first set up your Wi-Fi, so other people don't have your Wi-Fi. And then the panel, the control panel, has that IP address. You can also use the QR code right here by take a picture of that on your phone, and it'll bring up the control panel. So what I've done is I've changed my password and put it on a sticker above it so I know what the password is. Obviously that's blurred out on this video so you don't see that. So I'm going to bring up my laptop and I will show you how to log on to the Wi-Fi. Okay, to use the Wi-Fi Ranger, first you connect your laptop to the network that the Wi-Fi Ranger puts out using the IP address and password that they provide on the sticker. And then once you're connected, open a browser, put in the IP address of the control panel, which is also on the sticker, and it'll bring up the control panel. It'll show a list of all the Wi-Fi available around you, and if you're in a camper park that has a Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, you can connect to it. I'm connecting to my phone, which is an Android access point. And when you click on it to connect, it should prompt you for a username and password if there is one. I've connected to my phone before, so it doesn't show that. Then it'll negotiate and connect and then get an IP address for that phone, and then the Wi-Fi range will be on. And any devices in your camper that want to share that Wi-Fi connection can now connect to the Wi-Fi Ranger and share the bandwidth coming from that access point. The Wi-Fi Ranger has a pretty good range to be able to connect to public Wi-Fi because the antennas are on the roof, so it's the maximum you can get to be able to get Wi-Fi in the park. Hey, let's talk about the air conditioning system. The air conditioning system's in the roof. Unlike the heating system, which is over there and only heats, this only cools. Even though there's a red line in there and it says hotter and cooler, it does not actually heat. This is not a heat pump. It does air conditioning over. So you have two different systems, one for cooling, one for heating. The main control in the front goes off, low fan. Now low fan means the fan's blowing, it brings the air from the outside, but there's no actual air conditioning going on. For some reason there's two low fans, I'm not sure what the difference is. And then high fan, same thing, but there's blowing high amount of air out from outside. You want to use that if it's cool outside, so you don't need air conditioning, but you want to have some air blowing in here on you. Then we go to low cool. That actually turns the air conditioner on, but the fan runs lower and it doesn't cool as quickly. The cold air will come out of this front area. High cool is the highest, and it'll blow maximum. Now one thing about this fan is I don't have this air conditioning, I don't have it plugged into 30 amp right now, so I cannot put the air conditioning on. The air conditioning will not work on anything but a 30 amp connection at least. You cannot hook to 115 and run your air conditioner. You have to have a 30 amp circuit, and it definitely will not work off battery. It uses more power than anything else in the camper, more than even the microwave. So you need to have it on 30 amp. The dial at the back allows you to adjust the temperature the air conditioner turns on and off at. It won't actually adjust the temperature of the air coming out, but it will make it stay on for shorter and longer periods of time. So as I turn it to the left here, looking from the back of the air conditioner, you see that the amount of red showing gets higher and higher. That will have the air conditioner come on very rarely. If I turn it to the right, you can see it's more blue. So the more blue that has until hull blue, that will keep the air conditioner on virtually continuously. So you'll be using a lot of electricity there. The little levers here open and close the damper that lets the air come out both sides. So for example, at night, if we're sleeping in bed and we don't want cold air blowing on us, but we do want the air conditioning on, we'll sometimes close that vent, and so all the air will come out the other side. So it won't actually blow on us, but it will cool the camper down. Alternatively, if you're working in the kitchen and you want the air to be on you, you do the same thing. Don't run the air conditioner with both dampers closed because there's no place for the air to go, and it won't work, and I don't know if you might even damage it. Most of the time we keep the temperature control about in the middle, and we keep it on low or high AC depending on how hot it is outside. Now, on the sides of the fan, on the sides of the AC, are these plastic covers. To take them off, you just push on pull down the little tabs on each side until the cover pops off. It's a little tight, but once you pop it off, then on each side there's these washable filters that filtrate the air or getting sucked into the air conditioning, because the air conditioning sucks air from this side, cools it, and blows it out the front instead of sucking from outside. So to clean these air conditioning filters, you just slide them out of the tabs on one side, and then you can just wipe them off, and you can even actually rinse them in the sink, but make sure they're dry before you put them back in. To put them back in, you just slide them under the tabs again till it's in. and then pop the cover back in place. So depending on how often you use the air conditioning, you probably want to clean those fairly regularly to make it more efficient. This is your water heater and your water pump. The water pump is only used when you're not connected to city water. If you have a standard camper that came from the factory with the dinette, these two items will be under your right side seat. You just take the cushion off, and there's usually a screw there. You unscrew and lift up the cover, and you can get access to this. You don't need access to it every day, but once in a while you need to. In my case, I've converted this to a computer desk, so I've taken the pump off the floor and moved it on top of a little shelf here to give me enough room to set the desk depth that I wanted. The water pump doesn't need really much maintenance, except for there's a filter right here, and that filter you can take off by just rotating the cover here counterclockwise. If I was facing it, it'd be counterclockwise. It's clockwise here because it's reversed. And taking it off, there's a micro screen filter on there. You can take that micro screen filter out with just a slight pull, and then you might want to rinse that out or wash it off once in a while. What happens is if you camp in places with hard water, especially calcium water or even iron, that'll get clogged up, and eventually your pump won't be able to pull enough water through. You'll notice low pressure in that. So just once in a while, I don't know how often I would suggest, but once in a while, clean that filter off. As you can see right here, this filter needs to be cleaned. It's got some calcium built up on it. Not enough to stop the pump from working, but some building up on it from, it's probably been a while since I've cleaned that. The other thing you have to be aware of is there's a fuse that's right here. I have put this on this platform here, but yours would be somewhere on the frame of the bench, screwed in just like that. And that fuse is a DC fuse for the water pump. So if the water pump stops working, you should probably check the fuse. You take it off, you take the cover off, and there's a 10 amp DC fuse in there, automotive fuse. You can pull that out and check on it if the pump's not working and replace it. When you're finished with it, you just want to put that cap back on, and it actually has a little screw. That's, in my case, it's on this platform, but in your case it would be on the wall of the bench. And that screw can hold the pump in place there. And you should check that fuse if the pump's not working when you turn it on. The pump is entirely DC powered, so there's no other plugs. This other plug here will be on the floor under the camper. This is for the under the seat, I mean. This plug is actually for the water heater. The water heater runs off 120 volt, and it's actually plugged in to the circuit here. So if you need to work on it, you can actually unplug and take the whole water heater out. But that's going to be plugged in here, so that's going to be on a AC breaker inside the fuse box. The only thing you need to worry about in the water heater, when the access from behind here, is that there's two valves right here to bypass the water heater. Those are used when you winterize. That's all you really need to know about the water heater from the inside in the pump. Okay, let's talk about the smallest room in the camper, the bathroom. GeoPros come with this cabinet, which is quite large to store things in, and the cabinet goes all the way around the corner, so you can actually put things in. There's quite a lot of storage back here. You can put things around the corner in both shelves. What we do is we put tubs in, so we can slide the one tub over once it's full and have another tub. This sink here is not the standard sink. This is another upgrade I did to the cabinet. It gives you a lot more room here in front of the toilet on the 19FD. If you want to install a sink like that, there's also a video that shows the step-by-step instructions how to do that on my channel. But your sink will be very similar to that. It just will have a different faucet, and it probably will have a toothbrush or a cup holder on this side. A soap holder, I'm sorry, on this side. We kept the toothbrush and cup holder, but the soap, we got rid of the soap holder because we use pump soap over here. And it'll have a cabinet underneath. This one has a cabinet and an additional drawer down there. The sink cabinet here is the same as ours. One thing I will warn you is that this cabinet, when you're driving down the road, might swing open and all your stuff inside will fall down. To prevent that, I added a second catch at the bottom of the cabinet. So now it's got two catches that are holding it in place, and so far we haven't had a problem with it. Okay, now we'll talk about the toilet. So this is Dometic porcelain toilet that the GeoPro puts in. That's nice. However, if you've used household toilets before is the only type of toilet you use, there's a few differences from using an RV toilet. The operations for using the toilet are pretty similar to the way you would a home toilet, but a couple things you got to be aware of. First of all, The water doesn't flush like it would on a household toilet. In fact, when you open there's a foot pedal on the side instead of a flush button. So the foot pedal's over here. When you push that foot pedal all the way down, a hole opens down to the black water tank, and the waste falls down. And then water will come out these jets around the side, and it makes kind of a swirling action to clean the toilet. Now the thing about that is most household toilets have an S-band, and that keeps the smells of the toilet, of the septic system coming back up the toilet. RV toilets don't have that, so as soon as you open that chamber, you're going to smell all the smells coming out from the tank below. So you don't want to keep that open for too long. And you want to make sure you have the fan on when you're using the toilet, when you're flushing the toilet. Once it's done and clean, there'll be a little bit of water usually left in the bottom of the toilet behind the seal. Most people want a little bit more water than that before they use the toilet. So what you can do is push the foot pedal down just slightly, what they call like a slight push on the toilet. You'll see to let the water go in, but it doesn't open the valve at the bottom all the way, so you can get a higher amount of water in the toilet before you use it. Now you're going to watch that when you travel down the road, you don't have much water in there, although I would keep a tiny bit of water in just to keep the seal moist. But you don't have too much water in because you go over bumps and everything on the road, you're going to find that toilet water splashes out and you come to a wet bathroom floor. So that's a mistake we've made. To clean the toilet, just like a household toilet, but one thing I want to warn you is you don't want to put too much paper down the toilet. It's going into your black tank, and it can clog things up pretty good, especially the sensors on the black tank get clogged a lot. So don't use, for example, some people use those baby wipes kind of things in the toilet. If you do them, I would highly suggest, I know it sounds gross, to put it in a separate plastic bag and throw it out. Don't put it down the toilet, because an RV toilet is not like a sewer system. There's not a lot of pressure on the water coming through, so you end up clogging up your black tank. Another thing to watch is, this is the line in the back that feeds the water into your toilet. In front of that, right here, is a little filter, just like on the water pump. And that filter can get clogged with calcium particles if you have hard water that you're camping at. So if you ever find that there's hardly any water coming into the toilet, even though there's plenty of water in the camper, you need to take this fitting off, turn off the water, take this fitting off, and take the filter out, just like we have. It's a little mesh filter, just like it was under that I showed you under the water pump, and clear that pump out, because I've had that happen before, and it looked almost like sand was in there. Maybe it was like little seashells, but it was a bunch of calcium, and the toilet water was barely flowing through. So I took that out and cleaned it up, put it back in, until it was back to working correctly. So those are important safety tips. The smell that comes out of the toilet when you flush it in a camper is one of the biggest complaints that campers have about camping, because they say it smells bad when your black tank is giving off a lot of odors. So there's a lot of product you can use that you can put into your black tank to lower the smell. One of the most popular is a thing called Happy Camper. It's a little like tub. It's got like a white powder, like granulated powder thing in it with a scoop. And what happens is every time you clean your black tank, put a little water in it, take a scoop of that, flush it down the toilet. And we've used it before, and I thought it worked really well. Now my wife has converted to these Campco drop-in packs. We got them off Amazon. And you just drop those in the toilet. It dissolves when there's water in the toilet. It dissolves. You flush it down. Works the same as Happy Camper. It gives a nice smell. It's actually kind of a lavender smell, but it does a pretty good job of masking the smell. You still wouldn't want to leave the camper toilet thing open for a long period of time, but it does a pretty good job of mitigating the smells that come out of the toilet. So some product like that would make a big difference. One thing you realize is that you have two tanks on your RV. You have a black tank and a gray tank. Now the black tank is only connected to the toilet. Nothing goes into the black tank except for toilet water. So when you put this gel in here, or these packets in here, or the Happy Camper scoops, or whatever product you want to put in there, they'll stay. It kind of makes a surface on top, as my understanding is, makes it like a coating on the top of the water in the black tank that keeps the smell below that. Every time you empty it, it's going to go away, and especially when you flush the tank. So you're going to put a little bit of water in so that it has a place to dissolve into, and then add another one, and that's going to keep your black tank. You can dump your gray tank. The gray tank is where all your sinks and shower water goes into, not the black tank. So the gray tank you can dump as often as you want, and you don't have to put a new tab in, because of course gray tank doesn't give a lot of smell off. Plus all the gray tank appliances have S-traps to keep the smell from coming back. So when you go to a campsite, you can keep your gray tank, a lot of people keep their gray tank valve open full time, so I don't have to worry about emptying the gray tank. It runs all the time. You can't do that with the black tank because there's no S-bend and it smells, and the sewer salad will come right up into your toilet. So don't keep your black valve open on your when you're camping, and don't keep the flap open when you're flushing the toilet too often. I think that covers everything about the toilet in the camper that you need to know. The shower on the 19FD comes with this little bag on the side wall. You can take it off to clean it, but that's a good place to put your shampoo and body wash. It also has 3 little shelves here, but don't leave stuff there if you're driving because things will fall out. The standard shower head does not look like this one. This is a Oxygenics sprayer that we put on as an aftermarket. Gives us more pressure. The normal shower handle comes down and goes through this collar right here before it goes down to the sink to keep the hose from moving around. The new shower head I put in didn't use that. That way we can take it off and put it all the way down the tub for travel, so we don't have to worry about the shower head falling off when we're driving and hitting the towel and hanging down, which you used to do. The shower on the 19FD is also a tub, so not for an adult, but if you have children and you need to have them in the tub, it works as a tub for children, so you want to bath your children in a tub. For adults, it's just a shower. You got to step over the edge. We don't have kids, so we don't worry about that. This panel right here, you can take these screws off. If you ever get a clogged drain here, you can get access to the trap through that access panel. Let's talk about the faucet here. This faucet, you have hot and cold, and then the plug to get the shower to come on. Otherwise, it comes out of the tap, just like a normal household. But it has a thing here called the shower miser. Now, how the shower miser works is when you're connected to city water, you don't need to use it. Just leave it in the off position, which is the forward position. You never have to touch it. But if you're boondocking, and when you're boondocking, you really need to conserve water. So one of the big wastes of water is that you turn on your water heater, and you turn your shower on to have a shower, and even though the water heater water's hot, there's a long line between the shower and the water heater, and so to get hot water to your shower, you're going to turn on the water and let it run for a bit till it gets hot. Well, all that water you're running, that might be 2 or 3 gallons, that's wasted water. And when you only have a 20-gallon tank of fresh water, you don't want to waste that water. So you can turn your shower miser handle to the back all the way, and what's going to happen is the fresh water coming from your water heater and your water tank, instead of coming out the faucet or out the shower head, goes routed back to your water tank. So basically it's just cycling the water back into your water tank until it gets hot. Once it's hot, you put the shower back, the handle back here to the operating position, and now you have hot water right away. And no water is wasted down the drain and into your gray tank while you're waiting for the water to heat up. Now, how do you know it's hot? Well, you can wait a little bit, but shower miser has this cool feature. The hose right here is blue. This whole thing is blue. And that means that the water inside is cold. As the water heats up and it goes back into the water tank, once it's hot, that will turn white. Same color as the wall, kind of. And when it's white, the water's running through it, you know the water's hot. Now you can turn it on and have a hot shower, or at least a warm shower, without having to waste any water. So it's pretty cool. This will turn white when it's warm, and it's blue when it's cold. So the color changes on this shower miser to let you know. When it's in the off position, a little bit of water might trickle out because it's not 100% controlled, but 99.9% of the water is going to go back in the tank, so you don't waste any water. Yeah, the water in your tank's heated up a little bit when it gets hot, but it's nothing compared to wasting that water when you're boondocking. Once again, if you're on city water, don't touch it. Just leave it in the forward position. You don't need to recycle the water back into the tank. In fact, if you put it in the wrong position, leave it there when you're on city water, what's going to happen is it's going to overflow your water tank, and you'll have water running on the ground. So don't use that. It tells you on the warning sticker here. Using shower master with city water, fresh water tank can overflow and run on the ground. You'll have water underneath the camper, under your camper, and nobody will be yelling at you. Another part of the bathroom is the MaxxAir fan. It's not actually MaxxAir, that's a brand name. It's MaxxFan that they install in here, so kind of a clone of a MaxxAir, but it works kind of the same way. You've got one button that says fan off, one button that says fan on, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are 4 different speeds. When you first turn it, it'll be speed 1, which is the slowest, and you push it 2 more times to get up to 4, and then off will turn off. Otherwise it cycles between those 3 speeds. Before you use the fan, you need to open it. This little dial here, you first pull it down to unlock it, then you can rotate it clockwise, and you can see the lid opens up. You want to open that all the way up to let the air escape. And then we can push the button. We'll start at its lowest speed. When it's at its highest speed, it moves a lot of air. So in addition to taking any smells or steam out of the bathroom if you're taking a shower, it also will just suck air through the whole camper, if you have, especially if you have the window open on the other side. And so if it's a hot day but not that hot, it'll run the air through the camper and out the roof and give you a nice airflow. This is especially true if you're boondocking and you don't have the power to run the air conditioning. This runs off the battery and it doesn't use a whole lot of power, and it can really cool down the camper quite a bit on a hot day. When you're not using the fan, you can keep the vent open anyways and it lets air out and circulate through the camper even without the fan running. When you go to leave and leave a campsite and move, you want to be able to close this down before you travel down the road. So you crank that all the way down by rotating it counterclockwise, and when it's all the way down and at the end, then you just push it up and that locks in a position so it doesn't rattle as you go down the road. Over time, as you use this MaxxAir fan, there'll be dust gets collected on here. This is like a dust filter as well as a bug filter. So there's 4 clips on each around this screen. You just rotate those clips away from the screen, all 4 of them. You can take easily then they take the screen down and rub it off, or you can even run it under a sink if you let it dry to get all that dust off. So you want to do that fairly regularly, just to allow the airflow to get through. I don't think it's going to cause a problem if it's all dusty. It'll look unsightly, but to ensure maximum airflow, which is what you have the fan for, you want to keep that screen kind of clean. So that covers everything inside the GeoPro 19FD. Which gives you a good overview of everything you know to inside the camper when you first go camping. Because this video was so long, I had to break it into 3 parts, so this is the end of part 2. Part 3, which will also be posted on my channel, will cover everything you need to know to set up a campsite when you get to the campground with your 19FD, and everything you know to break down. So you can watch all 3 of those videos, and this should really have a good understanding of how to use your 19FD. So this is the end of part 2. Make sure you watch part 3, and if you like this video and all the videos on my channel, just subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified when I post new videos. Also, if you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.